straight out of the gate.
Oh, okay.
So, hi everyone, or well, hi Sheri, I guess, and if anyone else ends up watching this, hello to you as well. I'm outside because it's the first nice day in ages, and I'm determined to get a little bit of sun. So, Sheri, I think you were just talking a little bit about the last time we talked, and getting a little bit nervous about talking this time, or something. I'm not sure. Why don't we start with that?
Well, last time we were just trying to figure out how to get me on this process and stuff, because I'm a grandma, so I'm new to a lot of this electrical gadgets. But you just said, well, shall we do the interview right now? And I was actually in my pajamas for that interview, so I had no preparation, and I just went right into it with no thought, right? But today we'd scheduled a time, and about a half an hour before the time, I started feeling nervous and anxious and thinking, well, I'm supposed to have something profound to say. I don't know what I'll say. And that's just what I was saying to you, is the great gift from listening to Syd is that you realize it is your own thoughts that are making you nervous, and that there's nothing to be afraid of but your own self making you afraid. So it's a good thing to remember.
Yeah, it's quite funny. I'm going through a bit of that myself, Sheri, and that taps right into it. I mean, I actually jotted down a couple of quick questions, but I'll share this. I've been in the process of selling my gym, and the deal fell apart at the 23rd hour, or just in the last instances before it was done. And since then, so this was 2 days ago, and I've been able to watch myself go back and forth about being upset about it, or being stressed about it, or being caught up in about it, and realizing that nothing has changed. So it's been really neat to bear witness to that fluctuation, and not, and even when we get caught up in it, there's a knowing that it's temporary that makes it a lot easier, I find.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just those little things. It's kind of like people think. Of course, Syd had a very, because we're talking about Sydney Banks right now,
Yes,
and
yes.
he had a very profound experience, obviously, that was beyond anything that I've had occur. But those, just listening, and that was many years ago, because we carried on with our life and did other things. But those, once you have that knowledge, it's so hard to explain, isn't it? Because it's really a feeling. It's not really a thought, in that it's something you can go and write down so easily. And I think Syd did a great job of that, trying to let us know what the feeling was and how to get there a little bit. And not just to sit and meditate and stare at our belly buttons, but to actually be able to go out and live life and have that knowledge make a difference in our lives. And I think in the lives of other people that we touch, because our own children, our grandchildren, people we work with, you're just always feeling that you have to give. You can't keep this inside of you. Not that you go around preaching, but it's how you give and what love you share with others. And you see in others that they have, if you want to call it God, or the energy of all things, they have within them. All people, the worst behaving person that you might think is so despicable, he has to go to the electric chair. But somewhere in him is still that spirit, if only he could realize it, and he wasn't so bundled in all of his fears and thoughts and horrible thoughts and actions.
It really provides for a level of compassion that I hadn't known in my life until sort of having these thoughts, or having this breakthrough, if you will. And even, as I said, with the sale of my gym,
Yeah.
I could worry myself about why, but I know that they were the people who kiboshed the deal were acting from the best that they could act. They were doing the best they can in the moment, given their level of consciousness. And that makes it a lot easier to not be angry about it. It's just something that happened, you know?
Well, and we're humans, and Syd would get angry, and Syd had feelings and emotions, and he had times that I think he got back into his thought a little bit, but he knew far beyond me, but he knew the answer. He knew that there's a place within you that's in heaven, or whatever you want to call it, and he could go there more quickly and get out of that, but he could get triggered by some things that we all are.
Yeah, well, we're human after all, right?
Yes, yeah.
That's part of the beauty of it. And the sense I get is the more deeply we get into this knowing, the less time or the less we see those moments of discomfort as something negative. They become more of an experience rather than something to hang a label onto.
You don't have to get stuck in them. You don't have to stay there and be stuck there.
Precisely.
You can have that feeling, that sudden, something happened or whatever, but you don't have to live in it for days and days, and you don't have to go back and rehash it and think about it and take yourself back there. Like, we all do that sometimes, don't we? But I remember the time, and then you're like all depressed, and that was 20 years ago. So
yeah, I mean, for my own life, I have little things that come out, that something that a friend said to me innocently 35 years ago that still pops in every once in a while. If I'm not seeing things clearly, I'm prone still to dredging up stuff to justify why I feel the way that I do.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? You feel a little bad, so then you start thinking of more things of why you're there.
It's not a good strategy for alleviation, I don't think.
Yeah.
Listen, what we've got to be a little bit more
Structured?
No, not at all. Oh, this is much better, but I do want to sneak a couple of questions in. And what I was going to say, though, Sheri, is I've got to run at 1:45, so we got about 35 minutes.
No problem.
Who was Syd in your words as you knew him?
Well, as I told you the last time we were talking, I just got to one of these meetings because some friends had told me about it, and I could see a difference in them. And so I thought, oh, okay, they kind of persuaded me, really, come and listen to this guy. So I think the reason that I kind of heard something in the first moment that I met him, it doesn't happen that way with everybody, but I was so sure, I was so wide open. I didn't have any of my defenses, or my ego wasn't ready to stop things from coming in, because I just thought, oh, it's probably this is like 1974, 75, and there's lots of people around with long beards and long hair and things like that were gurus and stuff, and I wasn't really looking for that. So I think it just caught me off guard that I was so wide open. I get in there. Of course, these meetings were taking place in Syd's mother-in-law's house where he was living at the time. Beautiful little cabin on the sea and all that. And we went in and sat around, and this guy sat on the floor in front of the fireplace, and I had my knitting all ready to go because I was going to be so bored. And he just looked at me. This is how I felt, and I'm sure he probably wasn't looking right at me, but I felt he looked right at me. And the first thing he said is, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. And it just fell on my head like a load of bricks. I had a moment of complete paranoia kind of feeling, because I felt like this guy is right in my head, like he's reading my mind. And so it was kind of scary just for a minute. And then I just went into this very mellow place, like very, very relaxed. And it just took that fear and nervousness or anything away. And I just listened to his voice go on in this lovely Scottish brogue, way he would talk. And he was looking at other people. Then I think he knew he'd scared the life out of me there for a minute. But it was great. And that was how I always was after that. Whenever I went to listen to him, I would just go into this state of feeling almost mesmerized. It's hard to explain, but it's a feeling, And he would say these things. If I was using my mind, I would have no idea what he meant. But because I was very relaxed, I could just feel it in my heart. I just felt, oh, I know that. But I didn't know that yet, but I knew that. I knew that was truth. And it was just a recognition in me again and again and again. And I just kept going back for more and more. I don't think there was anything to ever replace exactly. I've listened to his tapes and I've seen the videos, which are close, when a video of him actually talking, not other people. But there's nothing quite like having been right there.
Yeah, it's funny. I was on a webinar today with Jack Pransky, and they touched on that a little bit about how it's impossible to kind of to convey the essence of what it was to be taught or to have learned directly from Sid. Um, how does how does that recognition, you said, you know, there's nothing to, or sorry, Sid said there's nothing to fear but fear itself, and you heard that as a truth. How does the recognition of a truth like that affect you? Or how did it affect, I mean, I know you've sort of alluded to that already, but how do you carry that with you?
Well, you know,
How did it change you, maybe, is the question.
yeah, but what I noticed was at the beginning, and then my husband noticed too eventually, was you just have more self-awareness gradually. You hardly realize what's happening. It's not like you can go forward and say, okay, I am not going to have any more negative thoughts. I am not going to, you know, it's not like that. It's just as you listened and learned more, and I suppose you could read books and all of that of him too, and or just have somebody say something once, like happened to Sid. Like a guy just said to him once, there's no such thing as insecurity. And that's what Sid heard. Um, in me, it just changed some behaviors. And in those days, we called them games, you know, the games people play. And I think Linda's first book, her uh, Island of Knowledge, it was reprinted later and took out a lot of what they called the hippie stuff.
Right, right.
And then the original book, like I have it right here, actually,
Oh,
Linda's book. That's her original book. And
nice.
I did the artwork in that book. It wasn't very good, but some of the drawings and things in there.
That's very cool.
But it has whole sections where she's asking Sid questions, and he's answering by saying, you know, once you see your games and you recognize your games and you can change your games. So he was using that language a lot then too, because that was the language. But I would just suddenly see things, and it affected my children, how I was with the kids too. And my son, who was always very interested in it all, he came to some events and things that had children involved, and he was always more interested than the other kids. But one day, this is just an example of how every morning when he'd get ready for school, he would go and put on his best clothes that I would think would be like for Sunday school or birthday parties or something.
Right.
And he'd come into the kitchen, and he was a really messy guy, and he's got 3 sisters, so he's the guy, you know.
Nice.
And he'd come into the kitchen in the morning, and I'd say, you can't wear that. That's your good white shirt. You're not wearing that to school. And he'd say, yes, I am. And I'd say, no, you're not. It's this and that. No, I won't get it dirty. And so we had this pattern that would go every morning. Isn't that cheerful? Like before you go to school.
Yeah.
So one day he comes into the room, and I said, you're not going to wear that. And he said, yes, I am. And I said, you'll get it dirty. And he said, yeah, I probably will. And he recognized the game before I did. Right away, I could see what happened. I just was like, oh, like I just saw this whole pattern change in our life. Like this thing, I saw this thing we had been doing day after day after day, that before I was just in it. I was like lost in it. And it was a little, you know, thing that happened every morning. So that was like one of the things. It's just that you change the way you are with the kids, and they start to see you being different in different ways, and they can catch on sooner than you. Like it seems like they don't already have so many trips and stuff going on, right? So he just saw, oh, well, we'll just stop this right now. And that was the end of it. The great thing was we looked at each other and we laughed till the tears came down our cheeks. Like that's how it was. It was just like we both knew we had something had happened to us. And those were the kind of things. Just better, more self-awareness, more, my marriage really changed because I wasn't running all these little trips on my husband that I didn't even know I was doing. And then I'd suddenly become aware and see them. And just everything in our life. And Sid would say to us, if you trust the universe will look after you. And we saw that he had done that because he had quit his job when he had no way to make more money. He didn't know what he was going to do. He had 2 children, the age of my older children, and he moved to Salt Spring, and he didn't know how he would be looked after or how he would look after everyone. And as the group was around him and us closest to him, especially at the beginning, it just was automatic that we would do things. Like we would bring him a roast out of our freezer. my husband went down and rebuilt some doors and fixed his house and did a bunch of stuff that had to happen so it could fit more people down there for him and the kids to live with Mary.
Right.
And this is just, he just was looked after. And we saw, well, it's working for him. Maybe it'll work for us too.
Do you think there's that sort of leads nicely. Do you think there's a greater, what do you think, whoa, it scared me. What do you think is the implication for a more widespread understanding of this? Hold on a second. Phone's making noise.
So you mean how does this spread to other people now?
Well, yeah. So I guess it's sort of the question is sort of from the I think the knowledge that you can't give it to someone else. It seems to spread organically through, as you've described, your actions changing or your behaviors changing, and that gets noticed by other people as a natural kind of curiosity develops, or a connection develops. Like something has changed. What is it? So now they're looking, instead of you or I trying to teach. Like, do you think it has a global implication? Do you think it could have a global impact?
Well, it could, because it's in all of us. It's in everybody in the whole world. I mean, if a person has an experience where they recognize something, and it could be from hearing Syd's words or reading the words or other people spreading it or seeing a change in someone else and asking how this is happening, it could. And I mean, I think the books are good too. That's one way to do it. I mean, I did some writings in that last book of Linda's because she asked me to, and I'm not a writer or anything, but I said, oh sure, I'll write something down about my first experience.
Yeah.
And there is the tapes and the videos. And it's not just Syd. He said you could listen to, I have one of his really early teachings here. I don't know if I could even find it in time, but where he says that listening to any enlightened person can lead the way. And it can be a guru, or, he even said listening to Jesus.
Right.
And so he realizes there are many, many people that have that knowledge, and that if they can share it with you.
What was when Syd shared, when he taught, and I know we touched on this last time as well, but what was he like as a teacher? Like, what was his style? Did he, like, Jack made a comment today, so Jack Pransky made a comment today about how Syd held people accountable. That if he saw you getting up into your head, if getting into your games or into your intellect, that he would call you on it, that he would challenge you.
Yeah, he would, even at discussions, not when he was speaking, usually people didn't speak out, but sometimes people would come already with the thinking that they were going to show that this guy's a charlatan, or whatever that word is. Right. And challenge him and try to argue with him. And he really wouldn't get in arguments, but I saw him a couple of times try to talk to someone and get a little bit angry when they just kept challenging him, and they weren't hearing, and they thought their way was better. And he would get a little, more forceful about that, as far as there's no point in them being there and ruining the experience for everybody else, or making it so someone else can't hear, if they've really made up their mind that they're just there to argue and they're just shut down. So he would do that.
Did that occur within the smaller group as well?
Oh yeah, there'd be times with different people. I think I was telling you last time about people wanted to show Syd how you were getting it, and that you were happy, and see how beautiful you thought life was. Yeah. And he could spot that right away, people just trying to be phony and that sort of thing. But it would be easy to fall into it and not meaning to. And I just remember one woman was just going on about, oh, Syd, this fly was in the window buzzing around, and I was just so mesmerized by this fly and realizing it was the energy of all life. And she was sort of going on like this. And Syd says her name. He said, so-and-so, flies are just swat. And I mean, the mood just came crashing down for a minute, like for all of us. It was like, whoa, you know. And for her, I'm sure she felt quite embarrassed. But he put up with it quite a bit. But I think a lot of times he thought, why are all these people trying to impress me? I'm just trying to share something with them that can change their life. They don't have to impress me. So, yeah, and he would often, I mean, he would definitely remind you that you could share and it's not so much like I say using the words and copying his words or trying to preach to people that don't know what you're talking about, but from the level of whatever your involvement is, being a certain way and helping them to see that like if somebody just wants to tell you all their old problems and bring up all this stuff that was from 10 years ago or something, you can just change the subject or go on to something else. Or you can actually say, well, why would we go back there and make us all feel bad? Let's talk about this beautiful thing that's happening right now. Look at this rainbow outside in the sky right now, or something like that. So it's more how you are with other people that can maybe help them change how they're feeling.
Jack, it's just interesting that these two conversations happen on the same day. Jack was talking about, being in a feeling.
Yeah.
How would you describe, and this is an unfair question, but how would you describe your own feeling when you dropped into that connection?
It's just, it's a warm, glowing, completely relaxed kind of feeling. You feel a lot of love, like I don't know if that explains anything, because maybe people don't know what that feels like so much, but it's just a feeling of loving everything and being more wide awake. I know I had a huge experience when we went to a thing. It was down in the States, and it was a 3 or 4 day event. And I guess I don't even know what happened, just listening over time for those many days to Syd. When I left, I went into Port Angeles to do some shopping. And I just saw this person that ran this little store as just beautiful. And like, that's how I was feeling that much inside, that things were looking extra beautiful, I guess. And all the little things in her store, and I got in this big conversation with her, and we spent a whole lot of time, and she just thought I was the most amazing person and stuff, and was going on to me. And it just, she was sitting there sort of half asleep in her shop, like not many people had come in, and she was having a boring day. And I left, and I was like, I know she was feeling more enlightened or something, and I really was. And I think it's when you do feel that, and you do just share good feelings with other people, that you can't, he'd always say, you can't fill a full cup. So if you have some knowledge or some feeling or something to share, you must share it for more to come in. So,
oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So you have to, yeah.
The really big thing, is if you don't share, it's hard for people to understand this, I think, sometimes, because Syd would say to us, after about 4 or 5 years of listening to him and that kind of thing, and he was getting known in the United States and all over the world, and he was in Hawaii a lot and went to Great Britain, and he started to need to be other places and not just on Salt Spring Island, and he didn't need everybody moving here to be around him, because he was moving on. But he would just let us know that, I've lost my thought there now. Oh yeah, he would just say, you need to go out and live your life. It's how you live your life now. You don't have to sit here and just listen to me anymore. I'm not the one that has it in, like, I have my own thing in me, but it's within you, and you have to discover it within you, and you also have to share, and you need to go and live your life. So that was one of the things for me. It was like, well, just go and just live your life, but at the same time, you better be sharing, because that full cup can't get anything more coming in if you don't. And I wasn't sure, and I used to say to him, I don't know, he would tell me, because I was working at school at the time, and he said, you've got this great opportunity with all these children to share. And I said, Sid, I'm not a teacher like you are, or some other people in the group are really good at speaking and sharing what they know. But I said, I'm not that. And he said, yeah, but it's not always what you say, it's what you do. People will not always believe what you say, but they'll always believe what you do. So he'd give you these things, and they were like puzzles, right? I mean, you're still going away and saying, okay. But over time, I did begin to see that I was sharing in times when I didn't even know that I was, and other times when I was consciously trying to do that in a certain situation. Like later on, I went to university and got my social work degree. So then I was working with people with a lot of problems. And so not just seeing them as that problem and not labeling them, and helping them to just see, well, tomorrow's a new day and today's a new day, and now we can have a whole different life. And seeing that in them, and not just setting them aside like I saw other workers do that, like giving up on people. So I think there's lots of ways of sharing, and it's not always being the people that are teaching, and it's not always being the people that are writing books even. It's the people that you don't even know. They listen to Syd, and as far as you know, they haven't had any more activity around the group, and you don't know what love they're spreading.
Yeah, there's something that I took away fairly early on, and after my sort of mini experience there, and that was that once it sort of touches you, or once you're touched by it, you can't undo that. All it can do from that point on is grow if you let it. So it's sort of back to that idea of going and living your life. You've got it, and I think certainly what happened with me, and I don't know if you saw this back in the day, but sort of two things: you get touched, and then you go out with an evangelical zeal to share it, and then realize that doesn't work. And now I lost my train of thought. What was the other thing there?
Well, we did that for sure with my husband's mom. We were so excited what we were learning, Dawn and I, and she would come over to visit us from Vancouver, and we would take her out to Syds, and I have a picture of her with Syd and stuff, and talk to her about what we were learning and stuff, and she was just like, whoa. And she was such a loving and giving and beautiful person already. I think she was probably higher than us already, and we were trying to pull her into it. And yeah, that doesn't work very good.
No, that's so funny. I did a little talk, I don't know, maybe half a year ago or so, and one of the women who was there is a member of my gym, and she's 67 or 8, and we were just chatting. I try not to talk about the 3 principles unless it sort of organically comes to that. And this woman just had it all figured out, man. Like, she was just, I was chatting and sharing what I thought was absolutely profound. Not really, but she was just having none of it. She's like, yeah, so what? Like, to her, that place that I saw was just natural. Like, she didn't know anything about the principles or anything. She was naturally in touch with that, with her wisdom, I suppose.
Yes.
Do you think, what I was going to say, what I was going to say is, so the evangelical part, but also the chasing after part, it's like what I imagine a heroin addict is like. He gets that first little bit, and then he's chasing the dragon for the rest of it. And I definitely experienced some of that. It was, I couldn't get enough for a while. Did that happen in the early days as well? Did you see that in the inner circle? Like, where people, I guess, sort of clung to Syd, or for me, it felt like I was trying to force feed myself more of this message.
Yeah. I suppose, well, there was people that were closer around him. I didn't really have a lot of time, or my husband. I mean, I was working full time at the school. We had 4 kids then, because we adopted his niece as well. And we were building our house. And so we were very busy, and we didn't have time. And there was some people that were very close around him, but I think maybe they had that time to give, and maybe they were people he chose to be able to teach. I don't know exactly. Yeah.
Did he ever play favorites?
I don't think so. I mean, he had people that Linda, he was very close with Linda in the early days when we started to listen, and they were doing the book together. And I know he was always really fond of Linda, and I know that they had their own differences and things like that. And they went off and lived their life. But I know that Sid stayed in touch with Linda. He was amazing that way. I mean, he stayed in touch with me. He brought me this book, The Enlightened Gardener. I think he did that book in 2001, and I was doing social work in Nanaimo, and I came out of work one day, and he was out on the street outside of my building. I don't know, and I was like, oh, and so he wanted to talk to me, and he stood and talked to me for a while, and he just thought the work I was doing was so wonderful because I was placing children that were in permanent care in adoption homes all over BC, and I had the record amount of children I had placed and things like that. And he was really interested in all that. And he just wanted to know where you were at in your life. And I think maybe just checking in to make sure you were still on the right road or something. And the next day, I came into work the next day, and this book, The Enlightened Gardener, was, the secretary said, oh, somebody came this morning and dropped this book off for you before I even got to work. So he would turn up off and on throughout when I was at university and here and there. And yet I know he was in the United States doing teaching at university, and he was leading his life all over the place. So I don't know how he had the time for all of us that had been there at the beginning to just drop in here and there in our lives. And of course, he was really close to Ken and Elsie. He worked with Ken in the pulp mill before his experience, and then brought them into that, and eventually they moved here, and Elsie was a good speaker. She had a nice voice, and so she would do some of his tape with him. And so we had different people, Pam and Jim, and Pam was amazing, and they went to Hawaii and lived there and taught school, and they spread love there. So she was a very good speaker, Pam. So I think he had people that he knew had the time to do different things, and everybody had a place in life, I guess.
What's is there anything that you miss?
I'd really love now to be able to just go and sit and listen to him speak.
So that's fascinating. How would that be? Do you think it would be different? Or what?
I think, yeah.
Well, yeah, that'll do. How do you think it would be different?
Well, I think it would be because I've learned so many things now since I'm 76 now. And I've learned, yeah. So throughout life, I've learned quite a few things, and I think I could hear even more. But I listen. I've got one of the tapes that he's on, and I listen to that, and it's, you always have a new experience. I mean, you know, these same words, they're just words. And if you can break past the words and break past and get the thoughts to get out of the way and just let your heart hear it, like you say, it's that most wonderful feeling. You just want more of that feeling. And then if you just clam that up inside of yourself and you don't share, like what you're doing right now with having people speak and putting it out there so that maybe someone who would never hear about Syd might have the chance to just hear someone say something about him, that's sharing. And when you do that, you must be able to feel it, like your cup gets fuller, because that's how it works.
Yeah. I have noticed that, and I try, and I downplay it because I don't have an ulterior motive of any kind in doing this. Yeah. It just sort of started to occur. Yeah, but thank you for that.
Yeah.
You know, I just wrote something down here that came into me while you were talking, and I'm going to maybe start asking other people this question as well. But what advice would you give to someone who's just been exposed to the principles?
Well, I'm not familiar with the principles even. I didn't even know about the principles until Linda told me that that was the new way. And I mean, the principles are just the same thing that Sid was always saying I take from what I've seen of it. And that's about thought and consciousness, and that it's within you. And it's not something you can teach really, but it's a way that maybe someone can hear. So everybody hears in a different way. Like some people would go to Sid and try to listen to Sid, and they would be, I always think it's your ego, but their self-importance or whatever wouldn't let them hear anything that he said. It just sounded like, who's this? And Sid he knew there's a lot of people, a lot of different kind of people in the world, and he wanted to reach as many as he could. And so some people would talk about, well, look at all the changes he made, over time in his clothing and different things. But I think at the beginning, he talked a lot about God and Jesus, and that Jesus was an enlightened man, and that you could listen to a guru or to Jesus, or to, but he would bring up that, and he would say, God is in you and God is in everything, instead of the energy is in you and the energy's in everything. He would actually use those words. And I think after a while he realized, or what was happening is those words have such a huge meaning to people connected with religion, different religions, that they couldn't see past that. So then he would change the words to try to reach more people. And I think that's what he did. And maybe with the principles, that's a way when he needs to be psychological and was talking to psychiatrists and psychologists and people at universities where you can't teach religion.
Right.
He would be careful not to use that kind of language, and he would try to have it more, in the principles, or set that way. Some people will come and they won't be able to hear anything from that because it might seem too structured or like school or something. I don't know, because I've never been to a session or anything.
Right.
But it doesn't matter. There'll be somebody that will hear, and there's different ways to hear. And maybe someone will just sort of hear about those and say, well, I want to know more about that, and get some of the books and read some of the older books with the actual wording of what Sid was saying then. So any way that you can get it out there, I think is not bad.
Sorry, Sheri. Can you see the lone Canada goose over there?
Oh yeah. Just walking along. We've got two of them in our yard right now. One is sitting on the nest. So we're going to have some babies shortly.
Cool. I'm in the parking lot of an industrial complex. There's just this.
See, miracles are everywhere. I told you. You just have to look. You just have to see them.
Now it's blocking traffic. It's beautiful.
When I was talking to you last time, we were just talking about the different things that Sid would do to fit in, like to be not so threatening, maybe, or to blend in, or whatever the reasons were. And at the beginning, it was pretty well hippies going and listening to him. We had, a lot of the people from the island here that ended up just, I heard about this guy. And so my husband and I included, we worked and so on, but we tried to be back to the land and do all that kind of thing. And we had the long hair, and we were living together. You don't get married, and all of that. And then suddenly all these people started getting married. I think Bill and Linda might have been the first ones. I went to their wedding. And then about 2 years after that, we got married, and a whole bunch of people got married. And he used to say about naming your children Tree and Fern and Sunflower and stuff like that. He'd say, this is how he was. He could say these things without coming and giving you a lecture. He would just be at a talk, and he'd be softly talking, and he'd say something like, it's okay to just be, and just be like everybody else, and fit in with society, and be one of society, because you are. And that way you can share more than you can by trying to be different and standing out. And he said, you don't have to name your children Sunflower and Fern and so on. He said, think about that. Is that even kind to do that? And I remember, and so within about a few months, people that had given their children very odd names were suddenly they were named, you know, Mary and whatever, Susan, and they actually changed their kids' names. The guys started shaving closer and closer and getting rid of the beards, and the hair got shorter, and everybody was dressed. Just joining society, you know. That's how big an influence. That's a big influence on a whole community. And this island only had about 4,000 people back then. And when Sid just started talking in his living room, he didn't put out, you know, he had an ad in the paper once to say, would people like to come and discuss, you know, with an enlightened man or something like that. But mostly there was nothing, but all these people just came like word of the mouth or something, and they would come to the island to hear him, and then people would move here, and we had people move. Lawyers came, and a person that started a flower shop, and people that were nurses and teachers, and all of these people came to the island, a bunch of the carpenters. And so he just created like this whole huge boom to the amount of people here. And after a while, that's when he started to say, you know, I'm going to be other places and doing other things, and you people need to go and just lead your lives, and you don't have to follow me around.
Yeah, I think that's a fairly common thing to get, you know, innocently caught up in following the guru, or, you know, who you perceive as a guru. And yeah, I mean, I certainly have gone through phases of that, you know, with Sid and with different martial arts instructors, where you start to venerate them a little bit, and you kind of lose sight of the fact that, wait a minute, they're people, you know, there's something very special about them, but at the same time, there isn't. And that there's something remarkable in that understanding of seeing those two things, seeing that those two things can live together. They can be unique and spectacular and miraculous and common as well.
Yes.
You know,
and they're in you, and you need to see them in you.
Exactly. Sheri, unfortunately, the clock's ticking for me a little bit. Is there anything that you wanted to add? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, one thing I was going to tell you, because you were asking about the cars that Sid drove back then.
What a memory! Good for you.
Silly thing. But but I don't know cars. I don't remember cars, so I had to write them down.
Oh,
but cool. So when we were first listening to him, he just wore jeans and like a plaid shirt like the other guys and he drove a 1963 Chevy pickup then. And then when Linda and I say when he was a guru. So when he got to this place where he started to wear the white top, like an Indian looking top and pants and all that, like a yogi guy.
That's the one that Linda made for him, right?
Yeah, and Linda made him a whole outfit, before we went to this big event in Vancouver. Then he drove a Maverick at that time.
Oh, no kidding.
So he had the Nehru shirt and the guru outfit, we call it. And then around the time I was starting to go my way, I was going to university and stuff, he was getting involved with the psychologists, and they came here first. I met them, and but he started to wear dress pants and a shirt and a tie and tweed sports jackets, and he drove a dark blue or black Buick then, very straight.
Wow.
he had bought this 3-piece kind of light colored suit in the 70s at a thrift store. It had the vest and the jacket and the pants and everything. And pretty well all the guys in the group, like Chip and everybody, all ended up borrowing at different times. And when they had to go to the bank to get a loan and things like that, and they had to dress up, or when they got married and things. And the bank manager said, I really started to recognize that suit after a while, and I knew that's a Sid Bankster because they all had the same suit.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that was kind of cute, yeah.
Oh, that's funny. I can't believe you remembered that. Good. Awesome. Yeah. That's so cool. All right. I guess for now we'll say goodbye. Are you going to are you gonna be able to join us when we bring David Banks on?
I really would love to. Yes, I haven't seen him since he was a teenager.
Oh, super cool. So
yeah.
That'll be May 15th at 2 o'clock our time. So what's that? 11 o'clock your time? 12, yeah, 11 o'clock your time on the 15th. But I'll make sure that you hear about that before then.
Okay, yeah, just send me a note to remind me, and Yeah.
So is there last one here, and we'll keep this between you and I. I heard there's a bit of manuscript kicking around.
Oh, you heard about that? Who did you hear that from? Jack?
No, I don't even know. I heard it from Linda. I heard it
Oh,
from
okay.
Linda. But this conversation of ours is probably going to go public, so I don't want to say much more about that. I don't want to let that fully out of the bag.
Yeah.
Have you had any more chats with Linda about it?
Oh yeah, we're working on that.
Oh, it's going.
Yeah.
It's going.
Yeah, it'll be the best thing because it's the real actual words, you know. Yeah.
Linda sort of gave me the broad strokes of it, and I am very excited for that. I wasn't certain that it was moving forward. That's super cool. That's very exciting.
Well, I just have these amazing things happen to me all the time. I just go, okay, I don't know what it's all about, but yeah, because I had that manuscript, and I didn't know it had originally been one that she had worked on. But I think Sid gave it to my brother-in-law way back in like '74 or something to read, because my brother-in-law had done a bunch of backhoe work for him and stuff down in his yard. And so he gave him those to read, and then he gave them to me, I guess. And then I packed them away, and then I was off and living in Nanaimo doing social work and all that, and finally got into all my old stuff and unpacked it, and I found them. So Linda recognized them because they were things she had actually done the typing. So yeah, so we're working on doing something with that because they are amazing. They're amazing. I can only read one page and I have to stop because there's so much to take in from that, you know.
Wow. Well, that's very exciting. That is super
Yeah.
exciting. Can't wait. Is there a timeline? You know what? I don't even want to know.
We have a timeline, but we were talking. We're talking on the back and forth emailing one day, this and that and this and that about it, and then I had this dream. We were talking about it, and I had this dream one night. I woke up in the morning and I was completely like right out of bed and energetic, and I said, I have to go find some pen and paper. And my husband's like, what are you going? I said, don't talk to me. Don't talk to me. I have to remember this. I have to remember this. And he's like, what is going on? And I just had got all these things that you have to put this in this. If we publish this, all of this has to go in there to say what this is about or something. I don't know. So I just wrote all this stuff down. It was stuff I didn't even know. I can't explain it. I can't explain this. So I said, okay, Linda, that's like, I don't want to have any of more of these things happen. So then the other day, we were just talking about some more stuff with it. And I walked into my sewing room, and I've been going through all these photographs and all this old stuff and sorting things out and throwing things away. And I guess I had plunked down some on the table there, but I hadn't looked at them because I walked into my sewing room and there was this portrait of Syd right on the top of in this one place looking straight at me. I should send you a picture because I took a picture of how it was on this table because I hadn't seen that picture in 30 years. But somehow it was the top picture that I would just walked into right after I was talking about this manuscript and everything. So I said to Linda, okay, I'm haunted or something now. I don't know what's going on.
Well,
said, oh, sure, you just put that picture right there and you didn't notice it. And I know, but don't spoil it. It's just really cool.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if you're being haunted by Syd,
I'm having miracles.
So that's right. I'm experiencing miracles. I'm haunted by an enlightened man. Yeah, it could be worse.
That's good. Yeah, that's a good kind. Yeah.
Not a bad thing. What a perfect. Okay, let's wrap on that, Sheri. That's awesome.
Okay.
All right. I'm glad. I mean, thank you again. This is. I think this stuff is priceless. Yeah, I think it's priceless, and I'm just so happy that yourself and Linda and some of you original folks are willing to share. Is just super cool. So thank you so much, Sheri. Thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Yes, we will.
Wonderful. Okay, bye for now.
Okay, bye.
Ta-da.